The shrill alarm cut through the quiet hum of the maternity ward. Code blue. The words echoed down sterile hallways as nurses sprinted past with carts, their shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The antiseptic smell thickened, and the air seemed to hold its breath. In delivery room 6, chaos had erupted. A mother in labor was hemorrhaging. Her blood type was B negative, one of the rarest. Without an immediate transfusion, she and the unborn twins would not survive. At the nurse's station, a young intern scrambled through a clipboard of donors registered that day. Only one name lit up in the database. Ethan Carter, tech billionaire, 32 years old. B negative. He had just completed his annual executive health check on the top floor. The nurse didn't think twice. She hit the call button, her voice trembling as she shouted his name into the intercom. Ethan Carter had been preparing to leave, his phone buzzing with emails and board alerts when 2 nurses rushed toward him. "You're the match," one of them said breathlessly. "We need you now. 2 lives are at stake." For a man used to negotiating billion-dollar deals, the urgency in her voice cut through the armor of wealth and power. He didn't argue. He didn't even ask who the patient was. He followed. The walk down to the delivery floor felt longer than any corporate battle he had fought. He could hear the wail of monitors before he even entered the room. He pulled the sterile gown over his tailored suit and stepped inside. His pulse slammed against his ribs when his eyes landed on the bed. Olivia Bennett. Her face was pale, damp with sweat, strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. The same woman he had once held close during midnight dinners. The same woman he had walked away from the moment she needed him most. Now she was screaming in pain, her body trembling, nurses pressing gauze and calling out sites. Ethan froze, the world tilting. He felt every ounce of guilt he had buried come roaring back. His feet wanted to turn him around, but the doctor's voice snapped him back. "We need you now. If we don't start the transfusion, she and the babies won't make it." For a heartbeat. Ethan thought only of the clinical fact. 2 lives at risk. He stepped forward, but before he could speak, Olivia's eyes shot open. She saw him. Recognition sliced through her pain. And in that instant, the heart monitor wasn't the loudest sound in the room. Her voice was, "Get him out!" she screamed, raw and ragged, her words trembling with fury and heartbreak. Her hands clenched at the sheets, her body arching against a contraction as tears of rage streamed down her face. "I don't want him here. Get him out." The staff hesitated, caught between medical necessity and the mother's demand. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the weight of his betrayal hung in the air thicker than the smell of blood. He had left her. He had abandoned her when she had whispered the words that should have bound them together forever. And now here she was, fighting for her life, fighting for their children, and the only words she could spare for him were rejection and rage. The doctor's eyes flicked between them, the urgency mounting. Ethan felt his chest constrict. This was not a boardroom where he could buy his way in. This was life or death. And Olivia wanted him gone. Her scream echoed in his ears as the room spun with alarms and orders. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Carter, the man who thought he could control everything, realized he was utterly powerless. The delivery room door slammed shut behind him, and Ethan stood frozen in the corridor, his breath caught somewhere between rage and shame. Nurses rushed past him, their faces taut with focus, their hands carrying trays and bags of blood. Behind those doors, Olivia was fighting for her life. His Olivia, the woman he had once sworn to protect, the woman he had abandoned when the word father had fallen between them like a grenade. Every sound inside that room cut through him like a blade. Her scream still echoed in his skull. Get him out. The same mouth that once whispered his name in the dark now spit him out like poison. For the first time, Ethan Carter, billionaire and self-made king of steel and code, realized his power meant nothing in a place like this. As he pressed his back to the cold wall, memories surged. 9 months earlier, a glittering gala beneath crystal chandeliers. Olivia in a black dress, her laughter softer than champagne bubbles. He had been drawn to her warmth like a man starved for sunlight. Nights blurred into mornings, city lights into whispered confessions. She had spoken of family, of a home filled with laughter. He had kissed her forehead and turned the subject to safer ground. But one night, she stood in his penthouse with trembling hands, her eyes wide with fear and hope. She was pregnant. His chest had caved in with panic. A family meant permanence. A family meant he could lose control. His own childhood scars locked behind steel doors in his mind had clawed their way back, hissing lies that he would destroy anyone who depended on him. So he had done the unthinkable. He told her their love was nothing more than a mistake, that he wasn't ready, that she should move on without him, and then he left. The memory made him sick now. He had built empires, bent governments with his wealth, but when Olivia had needed only his presence, he had vanished. The delivery room doors burst open, pulling him back. A nurse ran past, barking orders. Ethan caught a glimpse inside. Blood, doctors shouting. Olivia's face pale as parchment. And then two small cries split the chaos. Thin and fragile, but alive. Twins, his children. His knees buckled. But before he could step forward, Olivia's eyes found him through the haze of pain. Even from across the room, he saw the fire still burning in them. Her lips formed the words again, cracked and broken, but sharp as glass. Get him out. The nurse shoved him back, closing the doors once more. Ethan staggered down the hallway, his vision blurring. He pressed his palms against his temples, trying to quiet the storm of guilt and longing. He wanted to hold them, to touch their tiny hands, to beg Olivia for a second chance. But he had been cast out before he had even entered. And yet, deep inside the pit of despair, a single thought flared. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter knew what it meant to be powerless. And he swore with the same ruthlessness with it had built his empire that he would find a way back to them, even if Olivia hated him forever, even if it meant tearing down the walls he had built around his own heart, because walking away once had been the greatest mistake of his life. The night it all shattered still burned in Ethan's mind like a scar that refused to fade. He remembered every detail, even though he had spent months trying to bury it beneath board meetings, flights, and the empty noise of wealth. Olivia had come to him in his penthouse, her hands trembling as if she were holding the weight of the world. She looked so small against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, her reflection glowing in the glass as the rain stred down like tears. "I'm pregnant," she had whispered, her voice barely holding together. The storm outside had crashed against the glass, but nothing was louder than those two words. Ethan felt the walls of his chest closing in, an old panic crawling up his spine. Pregnant family forever. Words he had run from his entire life. He had wanted to pull her into his arms, to tell her they would figure it out. But fear was stronger than love that night. His childhood ghosts whispered in his ear, reminding him of slammed doors, of voices raised in rage, of promises broken by the very people who should have kept them. He had sworn never to repeat that cycle. And so, in the cruelest twist, he became exactly what he feared. "You don't understand," he had said, his voice sharp, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "I can't do this. We're from different worlds. You're better off without me." Olivia's face had gone white, her lips trembling as though she had been struck. "Different worlds," she repeated, her voice cracking. "Is that what this is to you, Ethan? A mistake between a billionaire and a woman who believed you actually cared?" The silence that followed was worse than shouting. She had turned away, clutching her stomach, her tears mixing with the glow of the city lights. "Get out," she had whispered, her voice breaking. "If you can walk away so easily, then go. But know this, Ethan Cart, you're not running from me. You're running from yourself." Her words had cut deeper than any blade. But instead of staying, instead of fighting, he had done the coward's thing. He left. The sound of the door slamming behind him was the last thing they shared that night. Now, standing outside the hospital room months later, the memory felt like a curse. Inside those walls, Olivia had brought his children into the world without him. She had faced the storm alone, just as she had promised she would. And when she had seen him again, her first words were the same as that night. "Get out." Ethan gripped the edge of the hallway railing, his knuckles white. For the first time in his life, he hated himself more than he hated his past. He had thought leaving her was protecting her, but all he had done was prove her right. He hadn't been running from Olivia. He had been running from his own fear. And now fate had dragged him back into her world, forcing him to face the very thing he had abandoned. His children were alive. Olivia was alive, but the fire in her eyes made it clear she would rather bleed alone than let him near her heart again. Yet Ethan knew something else, too. This was no longer about fear or pride. It was about redemption, and he would crawl through fire itself if that was what it took to earn even the smallest chance to stand at her side again. The cries of the newborns echoed down the hallway, raw and fragile, like music torn from heaven and stitched with fear. Ethan stood frozen outside the glass window of the nursery, staring at the two tiny bundles swaddled in pale blue. His heart slammed against his ribs as he pressed his palm to the glass, as if somehow he could feel them through it. His children, the proof of his greatest love and his greatest betrayal. One of the babies stirred, a small fist punching the air, his face scrunching as he let out a soft wail. Ethan felt something snap inside him. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with icy composure was undone by a cry smaller than his breath. He wanted to rush in to hold them, to whisper that he was here, but he didn't move. He didn't dare. Behind him, a voice cut through his trance, cold, sharp, and familiar. "What are you doing here?" Olivia's words were venom, low enough to keep from waking the twins, but sharp enough to pierce him clean through. Ethan turned slowly, and the sight of her stopped him. She was pale, weakened from blood loss, her hospital gown loose against her frame, but her eyes blazed with strength that shook him. She leaned against the wall, clutching the four-pole, every line of her body screaming exhaustion. But she refused to let him see her falter. "I didn't know," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking in a way it never had in public. "Olivia, I didn't know they were yours," she snapped, her lips trembling with fury. "Don't you dare pretend ignorance, Ethan Carter. You knew the second you walked away what you were leaving behind." Her words gutted him. He stepped forward, but she recoiled, her hand lifting like a shield. Don't come near me. Not after what you did." "I was afraid," he said, the confession spilling out before he could stop it. "I thought I'd ruin you. Ruin them. I thought you thought only of yourself." She hissed. Her voice shook, but her eyes never wavered. "You left me to fight through every doctor's visit, every sleepless night, every moment I thought I might not make it. And now you show up at the moment I almost die, thinking you can step back into the story as if you're the hero." The silence that followed was unbearable. Olivia's chest heaved, her hands trembling against the four-pole. The babies let out soft cries behind glass, and both their heads turned instinctively toward the sound. Ethan's knees almost buckled. "I don't want your money. I don't want your pity. And I sure as hell don't want you near my children," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "So listen carefully, Ethan Carter. Stay away. Stay far, far away." Her words hit harder than any boardroom betrayal, sharper than any market loss. Ethan opened his mouth, desperate to plead, but Olivia had already turned, her figure trembling as she disappeared down the hallway, leaving him with nothing but the sound of his children crying on the other side of the glass. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter was not the man with answers. He was a man outside the glass, staring into a world he desperately wanted to belong to, but was not allowed to touch. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old battles. Olivia sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her lawyer whispering strategy beside her. She looked calm to anyone watching, but inside she was trembling. The thought of Ethan Carter across the room made her chest tighten with anger and something far more dangerous. Remembrance. Ethan entered like a shadow draped in a tailored suit, every camera flash from the reporters outside still clinging to him. He had built his empire in rooms like this, conquering negotiations with a single raised brow. But today there was no empire to protect. Only two tiny lives that belonged to both of them. His eyes found Olivia's, and for a fleeting second she saw the man she had once loved. But she pushed the memory down. Love had no place here. The judge called order. Papers shuffled. Words like custody, visitation, parental rights filled the air. But for Olivia, it was simpler. She had raised these children in her womb alone. She had suffered the fear of not knowing if she would survive labor alone. She would not let the man who abandoned her suddenly stake a claim, because guilt had woken him from his comfortable life. Ethan's lawyer rose, polished and precise, speaking of stability, resources, and the best interests of the children. Every word dripped with money and influence, the kind of power Olivia could never match. Still, she held her ground. When her turn came, she stood, her voice soft but steady. "I don't care about his billions," she told the court, her gaze never leaving Ethan's. "I care about two children who deserve a father who doesn't run when life gets hard." He had his chance to stand beside me. He chose to walk away. I won't let him walk in now, as if none of it happened. The room went still. Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the table. He wanted to shout, to explain, to tell the world that his leaving had been fear, not cruelty. But the words stuck like thorns in his throat. All he could do was sit there as Olivia painted him as the man he once had been, the coward. The judge leaned back, his eyes heavy with the weight of the case. "Mr. Carter," he said at last, "I cannot ignore the fact that you are their biological father, but I also cannot ignore your absence. Until further hearings, custody will remain with Miss Bennett. You will be granted supervised visitation." The gavel struck, sharp as a bullet. Olivia's breath rushed out, relief flooding her. For now, she had kept them safe. But when she looked at Ethan, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not arrogance, resolve. His gaze burned with a vow she didn't understand, one that made her pulse race in confusion. As she left the courtroom, holding her lawyer's arm for balance, Ethan's voice followed her, low and steady, spoken only for her ears. "I won't give up this time. Olivia, not on them, not on you." The words crawled beneath her armor, dangerous and unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. The visitation room was small and sterile, painted in cheerful colors that only made the tension heavier. A one-way mirror covered one wall behind, which a court-appointed supervisor stood with clipboard, ready to record every move. Olivia sat in the corner, her arms folded across her chest, her lawyer's warning still echoing in her head. Trust no moment and show no weakness. Ethan entered quietly, not with the swagger of a billionaire, but with the unease of a man about to face judgment he couldn't buy. His eyes darted instantly to the two bassinets where the twins lay, tiny fists curled, their breaths soft as whispers. For a long moment, he didn't move, as if afraid that taking a single step might shatter the fragile world inside the room. When at last he reached them, his hands trembled. He hovered above his son, staring at the small rise and fall of his chest. "Hi," Ethan whispered, the single word cracking in his throat. "I'm your dad," the supervisor scribbled notes. Olivia's gaze hardened, but her heart twisted to spite herself. She had imagined the scene countless nights alone, but never with such raw honesty painted across Ethan's face. Carefully, Ethan slid his hands under the baby, lifting him with all the awkwardness of a man who had never held anything so breakable. His boardroom confidence vanished as he rocked slightly, his voice low and trembling. "You don't know me yet, but I swear I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt me again." The baby stirred, his eyes blinking open for the first time in the visit. Ethan froze, then let out a broken laugh, tears slipping down his face before he could stop them. "You looked at me," he whispered. "God, you actually looked at me." Olivia turned her face away, furious at the sting in her eyes. She wanted to remember only the man who had walked out, who had left her to fight alone. Bew, and the man before her now looked nothing like him. This Ethan was stripped of power, stripped of excuses, stripped of pride. He placed his son back down gently and moved to the other bassinet, his daughter's tiny hand twitching in her sleep. He bent close, pressing his forehead against the edge of the crib, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again like a prayer. "I should have been here. I will never leave you again." The supervisor cleared his throat softly, marking the time. The visit was almost over. Ethan lingered 1 second longer, drinking in the sight of his children as though memorizing them. When he finally turned to leave, his eyes caught Olivia's. He didn't plead. He didn't explain. He simply let her see the truth in his tears. For the first time, Olivia couldn't breathe. The wall she had built cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough for something dangerous to slip through. Because in that room, despite everything, she realized Ethan was no longer the man who had abandoned her, and that terrified her more than the memory of his leaving. Rain hammered the courthouse steps as Olivia clutched the twins' carrier against her chest, rushing through the crowd of reporters shouting questions. Flashes lit the stormy air, cameras feeding headlines she couldn't control. Words like scandal and abandonment clung to her name, twisted by strangers who had never lived her pain. She quickened her pace, determined to shield her children from the world's hunger. But when the black SUV pulled up beside the curb and Ethan stepped out, the storm shifted. He didn't flinch at the cameras, didn't hide behind tinted glass. Instead, he raised a hand, his voice calm, but carrying weight. "Back off. There are children here." The crowd fell silent for a breath, stunned that the untouchable billionaire had spoken, not like a mogul, but like a father. Olivia's heart pounded as Ethan moved closer, his suit drenched in rain, his gaze locked on her. She wanted to hate him, to push him away. But the moment his hand shielded the carrier from the downpour, she felt the same fracture in her armor widen. Inside the courthouse, the storm only worsened. Olivia's lawyer whispered that Ethan's legal team had filed for expanded visitation, a move that could shift the case in his favor. She felt her stomach twist. She couldn't let him win control. Not after everything. But as the hearing began, a new shock unraveled the air. The judge leaned forward, his voice grave. "I have received evidence suggesting Ms. Bennett may not have a financial means to support 2 infants alone. If this is true, we must consider what is best for the children's stability." The words cut like a blade. Olivia's breath caught, humiliation washing through her. Her savings were thin. Her job prospects uncertain. She had survived pregnancy and birth through sheer will. But money had always been a shadow at her back. Now that shadow threatened to take her children. And rose from his seat, his lawyer urging restraint. But he ignored him. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "if finances are the question, I will cover every expense, medical care, housing, education, anything they need. Olivia doesn't have to prove herself with a bank statement. She has already proven herself with her life." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Olivia froze, stunned by the sincerity in his tone. He hadn't claimed rights. He hadn't demanded control. He had defended her. The judge studied Ethan for a long moment before nodding. "We will revisit custody in 3 months. For now, the children remain with Miss Bennett. Mr. Carter will receive extended supervised visitation." The gavel fell, but the battle was far from over. Outside, the reporters swarmed again, demanding answers. Olivia tried to slip away, but Ethan caught her gaze under the storm. "I meant what I said in there," he told her, his voice raw. "I'm not here to take them from you. I'm here to earn a place beside you, and I'll fight every storm until I do." Olivia's pulse raced, torn between fury and the ache she couldn't silence. For the first time, she wondered if the greater danger wasn't losing her children to him, but losing her heart all over again. The night was quiet when the smell of smoke pulled Olivia from her shallow sleep. At first, she thought it was a dream, the kind that lingered from exhaustion, but then she heard the sharp crack of wood and the shrill alarm splitting the silence. Her heart seized. The twins. She stumbled from bed, racing to their room, the acrid smoke already curling under the door. Flames licked up the kitchen wall, beyond the hall. Hungry and fast, she grabbed the carriers, her body moving on instinct, coughing against the thick air as panic clawed at her throat. The front door was blocked by fire. The back exit was already collapsing in sparks and ash. She was trapped. Her only thought was to shield the children, pressing them close, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then the window shattered. A dark figure climbed through the smoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Olivia, give them to me." It was Ethan, his face streaked with soot, his eyes fierce and desperate. He reached for the carriers, his hand steady even as the ceiling groaned above them. "No!" she cried, clutching the babies tighter. The terror of losing them was worse than the fire itself. "Olivia, listen to me." Ethan shouted over the roar. "You trust me with nothing else. Fine, but trust me with this. Let me save them. Let me save you." Her lungs burned, her vision blurred, but the conviction in his voice cut through everything. For one breathless second, She remembered the boy he had once been, the one who had held her hand under the stars and sworn he would never let her fall. With shaking arms, she passed the twins into his grip. Ethan secured them against his chest, then wrapped his free arm around her. The floor beneath them cracked, the fire devouring everything, and with one final burst of strength, he pushed them through the window into the night air. They tumbled onto wet grass outside, gasping as firefighters rushed forward, dousing the flames that consumed her home. Olivia clung to her children, coughing, her body trembling as she realized how close she had come to losing everything. Ethan knelt beside her, his arm bleeding from the shattered glass, his suit scorched and ruined. He didn't care. His eyes searched hers raw with fear and something deeper. "I told you I wouldn't leave again," he whispered hoarsely. "Not when you needed me most." For the first time, Olivia couldn't summon hatred. She couldn't summon blame. In the flames of her broken home, all she saw was the man who had carried her children through fire with his bare hands. The sirens wailed. The night spun with chaos. But deep inside her, a crack opened wider, and through it slipped the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, Ethan had changed. The house was gone, reduced to a smoldering shell by morning, and Olivia stood in the ash with her arms wrapped around the twins, as if her hold alone could shield them from the loss. Neighbors whispered from behind fences. Reporters hovered at the street corner, hungry for headlines about the billionaire who had dragged his ex-lover and newborn from a fire. Every flash of a camera felt like salt on raw skin. When the firefighters finally cleared the scene, Olivia faced the cruel truth. She had no home, no clothes, no safe place for her children. Before she could even form a plan, Ethan was there, his shirt torn, his arm bandaged, his eyes steady on hers. "Come with me," he said softly, not as a command, but as a plea. Her pride screamed, "No!" Her heart whispered nothing but silence yet. With the twins fussing in her arms and nowhere else to go, she let him guide her into his waiting car. Ethan's mansion loomed like a fortress on a hill, its glass walls gleaming under gray skies. She had never stepped foot inside, though she had seen it splashed across magazines cold and unreachable. Now it opened to her like another world. Marble floors soft, light staff who bowed as they entered. Olivia felt like an intruder carrying soot and ash into a palace. But Ethan dismissed everyone. No assistants, no staff, no security. "They don't belong here right now," he said simply. "This is your space, yours and theirs." She wanted to laugh at the absurdity at the idea of this kingdom belonging to her. Yet when she laid the twins in a crib he had ordered at dawn, when she found diapers, blankets, bottles already waiting, it was hard to deny the truth. He had prepared for them long before the fire. That night, Olivia sat in the guest room, rocking her daughter, unable to sleep, the silence pressing heavy around her. Then she heard it faint at first, a voice low and unguarded, drifting to the crack of a door. When the hall, she followed it until she found Ethan in his office, his back to her, speaking into the darkness. "I don't deserve them," he whispered, his hand over his eyes. "God knows I don't deserve her, but I will give every piece of myself if it means they never feel alone again." His voice broke, and the sound of it tore through her chest like glass. She should have walked away, but her feet betrayed her. The door creaked and Ethan's head shot up, his eyes red, his face bare in a way she had never seen. He didn't rush to explain, didn't try to spin it into strength. "I meant every word in that fire," he said quietly. "I never stopped loving you, Olivia. I only stopped believing I was worthy of it." Her breath caught the walls she had spent months fortifying, shuddered under the weight of his confession. The storm of hate, grief, and longing collided so violently inside her that she had no words, only silence. And Ethan didn't push. He only stood there waiting, willing to burn again, if that was what it took for her to finally believe him. The Boston courthouse was silent, except for the rustle of papers and the steady tick of the clock that seemed to echo like a drum beat of doom. Olivia sat stiff in the front row, clutching the twins' blanket between her fingers, as if the soft fabric could anchor her in the storm. Across the aisle, Ethan stood tall yet tense, his jaw tight, his eyes never leaving hers. The judge's voice cut through the air, sharp and merciless. After reviewing the circumstances of the fire, the financial stability of both parties, and the best interests of the children, The court is leaning toward granting full custody to Mr. Carter. The words shattered through Olivia like glass. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her babies, her entire life, were about to be stripped away because she was not enough, not powerful, not wealthy, not untouchable like him. She wanted to scream, wanted to stand and fight, but her voice would not come. Then Ethan rose. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering restraint. But he ignored it. He looked at the judge, his voice steady, but filled with fire. "No, I will not take them from her." Gasps filled the room. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching. Even Olivia's lawyer froze. Ethan stepped closer to the bench, his words cutting through the silence. Olivia carried them alone. She fought through the nights alone. She risked her life to bring them into this world. I was the coward who left, and she was the one who stood. She is their anchor, their home, their mother. If you think money makes me better, you are wrong. The only thing I ask is to be allowed to love them beside her, not instead of her. The judge stared at him for a long moment before speaking. "Are you saying you decline sole custody, Mr. Carter?" "Yes," Ethan answered without hesitation. "I decline it. What I want is a family, not a possession." Olivia's eyes blurred with tears. The first one she had let fall in that courtroom. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who abandoned her, but as the man willing to lose everything for her and their children. The gavel struck, the decision sealed. Joint custody, equal rights. A chance not just for the twins, but for the two of them. When the hearing ended and the crowd spilled into the rain, Olivia lingered on the courthouse steps, her chest heaving. Ethan approached slowly as if afraid to break the fragile thread binding them in that moment. "I told you in that hospital I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice rough. "And I meant it. I will prove it every day for as long as you let me." She looked at him, the storm of the past crashing against the fragile hope of tomorrow. Her heart still bore scars, but as she watched him lift their son into his arms, shielding him from the rain, she felt something shift. For the first time since that night of fire, she let herself imagine a future where she was not alone, where the man who once left was the same man who had finally found the courage. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next.